Hello, everyone. Welcome to a meeting of the Boston Region Metropolitan Planning Organization. I'm David Moeller. I represent Secretary Monica Tibbetts not here. You are invited to participate in our transportation planning process regardless of your race, color, national origin, including limited English proficiency, religion, creed, gender, ancestry, ethnicity, disability, age, sex, sexual orientation, gender identity or expression, veteran status or background. You can read the full notice of your rights and protections at www.boston.org/MPO_NO_DISCRIMINATION. This meeting is accessible to people with disabilities. Zoom products are compliant with exceptions with the following standards: Web Content Accessibility Guidelines 2.1 Level AA standards and revised Section 508 standards. If you require any additional accommodations in order to participate fully in this meeting, or if you have any technical difficulties, please contact Ibu Qureshi and the MPO staff at iquraishi@ctps.org or 857-702-3695 or via the chat box. All participants will join the meeting with muted microphones. Please rename yourself to include your first name, last name, and affiliation. After roll call, board members may mute and unmute themselves. Always remain muted unless actively speaking. To participate in the discussion, please select the raise hand function. Find this by clicking either on the participants button at the bottom of the screen, and a window will pop up with the raise hand button at the bottom, or the reactions button in the toolbar. The chair will then call on participants. Please raise your hand via Zoom if you would like to use AI Note Taker during this meeting. If you are on the phone, you can use *9 to raise your hand. Please call the roll.
David, mascot seat 1.
Dave, we're having a hard time hearing you.
So sorry, mascot seat 1.
Oh, David Moeller. I'm sorry. That was my fault.
Not a problem at all. And let me know if my audio comes in soft. Mascot seat 2.
John Bouchard representing Highway Administrator Jonathan Gulliver, present.
Welcome. Mascot Highway Division.
Mascot Highway Division, John Romano here.
Hello. The MBTA.
Good morning, Sandy Johnson, representing General Manager Filling in the MBTA.
Good morning. Regional Transportation Authorities, Metro West Transit Authority.
Tyler Charasi, representing Administrator Jim Nee for the MWRTA. Present. Good morning.
Good morning. Massport.
This is Sarah Lee representing Massport.
Hello. MAPC.
Good morning, Eric Barrasso with MAPC.
Good morning. The MBTA Advisory Board.
Frank Trementozzi representing Mayor Koch, Chair of the MBTA Advisory Board.
Good morning. The City of Boston, seat 1.
Jen Rowe representing Mayor Michelle Wu in the City of Boston.
Welcome. The City of Boston, seat 2.
Good morning. Matt Moran representing Mayor Wu in the City of Boston.
Morning. At-large City, City of Everett.
Good morning. Jay Monty representing Mayor DiMaria and the City of Everett.
Good morning. At-large City, City of Newton.
David Kozis representing Mayor Ruth Ann Fuller in the City of Newton.
Welcome. At-large Town of Arlington.
Leonard Jiggins representing my esteemed colleague, Chair Diana Hahn in the town of Arlington. Thank you.
Welcome, welcome. At-large Town of Brookline.
Good morning. Erin Chute representing Select Board Chair Bernard Green for the town of Brookline.
Good morning. Intercore Committee, City of Somerville.
Good morning. This is Brad Rawson, City of Somerville, representing Mayor Ballantyne and the Intercore subregion.
Hello. Minuteman Advisory Group on Interlocal Coordination, Town of Acton.
Morning, Nate Ryan, alternate for the Magic subregion, representing Acton Select Board Chairman Dean Charter.
Morning. Metro West Regional Collaborative, City of Framingham. Next is North Shore Task Force, City of Beverly.
Hi, it's Darlene Nguyen representing Mayor Michael Cahill and the North Shore Task Force.
Welcome. North Suburban Planning Council, Town of Burlington. Oh, I'm so sorry. A quick search here. Okay. Okay. Next, South Shore Coalition, Town of Hull. Okay, quick search. Okay. Southwest Advisory Planning Committee, Town of Rentham.
Rachel Benson, Director of Planning and Economic Development, representing the town of Rentham and the SWAP region.
Good morning. Three Rivers Interlocal Council, Town of Norwood.
Good morning, Tom O'Rourke from the town of Norwood, representing the Church subregion.
Good morning. The Federal Highway Administration. Anyone on the roll that I have not called this morning? With that, back to you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, David. I just have a quick announcement. So we've talked to our general counsel, and the minutes from the executive session of June 26 are not yet ready to be released publicly. The lawsuit under which that executive session was held is still ongoing. So just for the record, we will not be releasing those minutes at this time, and we will keep everybody updated when they become available. Next, Executive Director's Report. Tegan?
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, thanks. I've had some problems with my audio this morning. Thanks, everybody. Welcome to today's MPO meeting. I have just a few quick updates to share in my report. First, I'll follow up on a staffing update and then just give you a brief overview of today's agenda and the next meeting times. So for the next slide, please. I believe at the last meeting, I announced that Bohui Liang would be joining us soon, and she has now joined us as the travel demand modeling team's manager of model development. I gave a few details about her background before, but really Bohui is bringing a wealth of experience to our organization in data science, simulation modeling, and optimization. And we're very happy to have her and would like for her just to be able to say a brief hello today, just so again, you can put a face to a name and know who you're reaching out to if you'd like to on the topic of model development. Bohui, are you able to unmute and say hello?
Yeah, thank you for the introduction, Tegan. I am really excited to join Boston MPO and especially the model development team. My career has always centered on using data and modeling to solve complex and real-world problems, from improving patient flow in hospitals to optimize automatic warehouse operations. I'm very excited to be here to have this opportunity to apply the same approach in transportation that touch everybody's daily life and shape the future of the region. Looking forward to collaborating with all of you and advance our modeling capability, support the planning decisions for the region. Thank you.
Thanks, Bohui. Thanks
Welcome,
for sticking with.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, let's go on to the next slide, please. So for today's agenda, next slide. Yes. So in addition to our regular business, public comments, and committee chair reports, we have 4 presentations coming up today. The first one will be about rescoring, a proposal to rescore some of the projects that are currently in the TIP that either have not been scored before or were scored under an older prior scoring process. So Ethan Lapointe will share this proposal with you all and invite you all to have a discussion about that if you would like. Then we'll move on to 3 different presentations about work that's been carried out more or less throughout this past year. So first, Cal Casiglio will present from the Multi-Mobility Improvement Program, the Woburn Intersection Study that was carried out over the last year, looking at the intersection of Presidential Way and Commerce Way, Atlantic Avenue, as well as the I-93 exit 30 in Woburn. So he'll give you an update on how we worked with municipal staff and MassDOT and residents to come up with the proposed conceptual designs for improving safety and operations at those intersections. And then the last two projects, this follows on from an update I gave in my last executive director's report, the last meeting as well, where I gave you some updates on grant-funded research activities, primarily the Mobility, Access, and Transportation and Security Grant, MADI grant, and the Municipal Vulnerability Preparedness Grant. And so today, I had promised future presentations. So today, Rebecca Morgan will join us at the beginning of those two meetings just to give an overview and set the stage for those two grants, which will then be followed by more in-depth presentations by some of the staff who worked on those grants. So I look forward to having those conversations with you as well. And then if we can go to the next slide. For future meetings, I just want to emphasize that the September 18th, 2025, the next scheduled MPO meeting has been canceled. Not only do we not necessarily need to have that meeting due to kind of timing and needs of items that would become before the board, it's also the week of the AMPO annual conference. And so many of us as staff, and maybe some of the others of you here, will be attending that conference. And we'll look forward to coming back and talking a bit about what we learned there. Then the next meetings will be in October virtually on October 9th and 23rd. Those dates have been somewhat shifted, so please make sure you have them correctly in your calendars. And then the following meeting after that will be our hybrid in-person November 13th annual meeting, and that is at a different time. It is at 1:00 p.m. So again, please make sure your calendar is updated, and also save some time if you can to join us at 12:30 on November 13th to do some networking and enjoy some refreshments. And that is my report, Mr. Chair. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Tegan. Any questions for Tegan at this time? Seeing and hearing none, the next item on the agenda is public comments. Anyone from the public want to comment? Seeing and hearing none, if you decide to comment during the meeting, please raise your hand and we will try to call on you. Next item is committee chairs reports. Are there any? Jen Rowe.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The TIP Process Engagement and Readiness Committee, TIPR, last met on July 24th, and we discussed updates to the 2021 TIP Project Cost Increase Policy. We've been exploring potential updates to that for several months now. I had already reported on the outcomes of that meeting, but I thought it worth a brief recap because we're going to be discussing both of those updates today, the first during this full board meeting, and the second at the TIP committee meeting this afternoon. So the first update relates to project rescoring. After several thoughtful conversations on the topic, the committee was, in the end, very supportive of the MPO staff's proposal to rescore a set of 12 projects in the regional target program that were either never scored at all or were scored under criteria that are not directly comparable to the criteria that, or the scoring mechanism that we use at this time. So staff are going to be bringing that proposal to the full board today. So you'll hear more about that in a few minutes. The second update to that policy is a new set of readiness guidelines. These guidelines would define both the stage at which a project may enter the TIP and also importantly set expectations for how design should progress year to year in order for the project to maintain its initially programmed federal fiscal year. So that conversation will actually continue this afternoon at the committee level, and I also expect it to come before the full board sometime before the end of the year. As always, you're welcome and encouraged to join us at TIPR this afternoon. We're meeting at 2:30 p.m. Today, and you can also reach out to me, Ethan, or Adriana at any time with questions or thoughts. So thank you.
Thank you, Jen. Any questions for Jen? Seeing none, are there any other committee chair reports at this time? Okay, let's go right into the TIP discussion. Ethan Lapointe. I assume this is you, Ethan.
Yes, thank you. Good morning, everybody. My name is Ethan Lapointe. I'm a senior planner on MPO staff. So as Jen just alluded to, this first presentation this morning is an update from staff on an initial wave of project rescoring for projects that are currently funded within the Transportation Improvement Program, or TIP. If we can go on the next slide and the one after that, please. So Just to give some background on the nature of project rescoring, the 2021 TIP project cost policies that this board adopted back in September of 2021, which took effect for the development of the 2023 to 27 TIP cycle, established project rescoring as a key component of understanding the impacts that changes to project costs and project scopes would have on projects that this board had already voted to fund. After 4 TIP cycles of these policies being in effect, the current policy around project rescoring has not been utilized despite multiple projects that are currently being funded through the TIP, triggering the different conditions that those policies lay out that would normally require a project to be rescored, such as cost increases above 25%, as in 25% of the cost, not 25% design, and changes to project scopes. Now, if we can go on to the next slide, please. What staff have identified is that part of why these policies have never been utilized is that the current policy, as written, is reactive to project changes. The rescoring triggers that I just alluded to are usually identified during early February and presented to the MPO board at what this coming year, or I should say, I'm sorry, this past year was the February 20th quarterly update reflecting TIP readiness days updates. Again, that meeting is usually where cost increases or project scope alterations would be brought and explained to by the MPO board. That time window between February 20th and what the final scenario vote is for project programming, this past year being April 3rd, only provides about a month for information to be updated on projects, which is insufficient for staff to actually furnish information to this board to make those programming decisions, meaning that the current policy is not only reactive, it is also not timely for empowering this board to make the most informed decision. Again, based on the timeline that's illustrated on screen here, between the readiness days update, final scenario being adopted, and the draft release of the TIP. If we can go on to the next slide. What staff have generally identified, which is prompting this initial rescoring push, is that there are various flaws in the current approach that mostly revolve around the nature of consistency. Namely, when we say consistency about scoring projects, this is meant to be about fairness, ensuring that projects can be evaluated against one another in a very straightforward manner, and also setting expectations for project proponents that may understand what happens when their project is placed on the TIP. The current policy, as written, requires the board to select individual projects for rescoring at any time, which means that if there are, for example, a group of projects like we'll be discussing today that were all scored, let's say, 5 or more years ago under a very different criteria set, there is a possibility that one of those projects may be rescored and another one may not be, which therefore means it is not a consistent approach. Moreover, the current policy as written does not provide any clear expectations for proponents to know what they should provide to be scored by MPO staff, especially recognizing that as criteria has changed over time, the actual nature of the applications that proponents would normally submit has differed in some way substantially from what they may have initially provided. This has led, when we first attempted rescoring during last year's TIP cycle, to some applicants providing incomplete information that would adversely impact their scoring. And again, because the current policy does not identify a time for rescoring to happen, and traditionally would only happen in a very reactive manner, it can also be very disruptive for stakeholders that are involved if, with very little notice, a project proponent was told that their project would need to be rescored. By rescoring at this stage of the TIP cycle, we can give proponents a little bit more time to react and make sure that not only would this information be more timely, but that proponents, that we can minimize disruptions to the actual design and development of these projects. And as I mentioned earlier, there is also no mechanism in place under the current policy for, let's say, automatically rescoring projects that are evaluated under substantially different criteria sets. I'll get into that shortly, but the bottom line here is that a project score is meant to enable meaningful cross comparison between all of the projects that are funded through the TIP, and also to quantify how the projects that the MPO board is funding make progress towards the MPO's goals that are set through the long range transportation plan, and also to help support our performance-based planning program, which helps us to determine exactly what TIP investments are doing. If we can go on to the next slide, just to kind of summarize, there are some questions that we have identified that we think this exercise resolves. When I mentioned consistency and expectations earlier, these charts show what we think the 4 overarching themes are for this effort, which is around consistency, setting clear expectations, fairness and predictability for our proponents, and repeatability, referring to establishing a policy in the long term that would be able to be replicated with different LRTP cadences. For project proponents, we think that we can resolve with a policy the questions of what files should be provided, why is a project being rescored and not another, what would require a project to be rescored, whether or not rescoring alters funding considerations. If we can go on to the next slide, we also believe that both staff and the board have some questions that are currently unanswered, but this policy can help to resolve. Namely, how do we choose which projects to rescore, which are not? How do we time rescoring to be relevant to programming scenarios? How can project scores be made more valuable when we have differences between criteria sets? And how do we reduce major information gaps on funded projects? The next slide just shows both of these next to each other. So if we go on to the one after this, please. I will note that this has been an ongoing discussion. While this is the first time we are bringing this topic to the MPO board, it is not only not the last time we'll be bringing it to the board, but we've also had several presentations in the past where we initially raised the issues around our last attempt at project rescoring for the federal fiscal year's 2630 TIP at the March 6th MPO meeting when we were trying to present new project scores. And at that meeting, staff briefly summarized some of those issues that I just mentioned. I'd also note the TIP committee has had 3 different meetings discussing about how to reinforce both the scoring elements of the TIP project cost policies and also for later MPO meetings, readiness guidelines as well. This was the May 15th, June 12th, and July 24th TIP committee meetings. And we're also at this afternoon's meeting going to be having a little bit of a debrief as far as next steps for this. If we can go on to the next slide, please. I will just reiterate that today's objective is about informing the MPO board of an initial process that staff are going to be undertaking. But at a later meeting, staff are going to come back to the board with an actual policy that is to be put into place that would be more to establish long-term expectations for how projects to be rescored. Again, updating the actual practice of rescoring requires an actual update to the existing TIP project cost policies, which does require future approval. That's not for today. Today is about ensuring that the project proponents for the 13 projects we'll be talking about have sufficient time to provide information for consideration by this board as we start developing the 2027 to 2031 TIP. Again, this is a separate but related initiative from staff to that policy. If we can go on to the next slide, I believe this then takes us just into that timeline I mentioned. So again, we are hoping to actually launch the solicitation of new information for project rescoring today on September 4th. And by doing that today, we can line up the solicitation period with the new project applications, giving these new or this rescoring solicitation and the proponents there 4 full months to provide updated project information forms, which we believe helps to minimize any disruptions to the ability for these proponents to develop their project. And by overlapping with the project application period for the next TIP for the new projects, it also helps to unify this effort with the scoring effort that staff are already gearing up for this coming TIP. So it not only minimizes disruptions for our proponents, it also empowers staff to sort of do this at scale in a way that we otherwise would not be able to. If we go on to the next slide, I believe this then takes us into the actual projects. So if we can go on to the next slide, please. We have 13 projects here today. One of these is actually new and was not shown to the TIP committee, and I'll explain why. So this first list of 5 projects are all actually unscored projects that are also being proposed for initial scoring on the TIP. Many of these projects were either included as part of new funding requests that proponents may have submitted. In the case of the Framingham Route 126-135 MBTA design project and the Lexington design of safety improvements at the Interstate 95 and Route 4-225 interchange projects. The other three on screen were incorporated as part of MassDOT fill-in projects. It's worth noting for that these unscored projects, the reason why staff are scoring these is actually to also support more so the performance-based planning program, just to help improve our understanding of what these projects are delivering once they are being substantially completed as they approach construction. So these projects are in total the Medford Shared Use Path connection at the Route 28 Wellington Underpass, which is programmed in fiscal 26. The Linfield Rail Trail construction from Ford Avenue to Nichols Lane Phase 1, also fiscal 26. And the Stratton School Improvements Project in the town of Arlington, fiscal 26. That project is the one that I mentioned that the TIP committee did not see. The reason why this project is now included in the list is that, as some members may remember, at the last MPO meeting for Amendment 14 to the 25-29 TIP, this project was actually delayed out of federal fiscal year 2025, given it is now slated under a future amendment to be programmed in federal fiscal year 2026. The project is now being included in this list alongside the Linfield and Medford projects, which come from the same former statewide prioritization source. So in the interest of consistency, this project is now the 13th. Any future projects, if we can go on to the next slide here, these are all projects that had been previously scored in other TIPs. Starting off, we're just moving in order of the federal fiscal years under the 2630 TIP that these projects are programmed, is the improvements on Boylston Street in the city of Boston, which was initially evaluated under the federal fiscal years 2016 to 2020 TIP. The Hingham improvements on Route 3A from Otis Street Cole Road project, initially evaluated under the 2020 to 2024 TIP. The Milford rehabilitation on Route 16 project, which was initially evaluated under the 2020 to 2024 TIP. And the Norwood intersection improvements at Route 1 and University Avenue and Everett Street project, which was initially evaluated under the 2017 to 21 TIP. I will also note before we move forward, this chart on screen here includes a column that shows the project score. Some may have noted that many of these projects evaluated under these older TIPs are using a 134-point scale versus the current scoring scale that is employed, which is a 100-point scale. So again, back to that point of consistency that I made earlier, part of why we want to rescore these projects under this new scale is to make sure that we can compare these projects like to like against all of the other projects on the TIP that are using that updated information. We go on to the next slide. We have the same thing here for many of these subsequent projects just in later years of the TIP. This is the Everett reconstruction on Beecham Street project, initially evaluated for the 2020 to 24 TIP. The Ipswich resurfacing and related work on Central and South Main Streets project for the 2019 to 23 TIP. The Woburn intersection improvements at Woburn Common project from the 2021 to 25 TIP. And the reconstruction of Rutherford Avenue in Boston, which was initially funded back in the 2016 to 2020 TIP, but was not scored using TIP criteria. Rather, the reconstruction of Rutherford Avenue was actually scored through the separate long-range transportation plan process when it was incorporated into the TIP. So it says unscored here. It was scored, but it wasn't scored under TIP criteria. So with all that, if we can go on to the next slide, those are our 13 projects. I will just reiterate again that today's objective is about ensuring that our project proponents have enough time to provide information for development of the 2731 TIP. We will be coming back to this board later to talk about how a policy could be put in place going forward to set more clear expectations for other projects that may be evaluated under more recent but still dissimilar TIP criteria sets. That would be a cadence that would likely line up more with the next long-range plan development cycle. So a few years from now, but just trying to get a system in place to start working off of. So with that, if we go on to the next slide, I'm happy to take any questions on this effort.
Questions, discussion? Jay Monty.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, and thank you, Ethan. So I understand the intent of what you're trying to do. I understand that we're trying to come to a more fair way of evaluating projects, making sure everybody's being compared at the same level. But I'm not sure I support this in the way that we're laying this out. I have a real issue with taking projects that are already programmed, where proponents have put in considerable, time, effort, and money to advance those projects, and then sort of saying, well, it's been a little too long since you've been scored, which may have been because that project got pushed out because of other cost overruns, right? So I'll use Peachtree Street as an example, which I think would be probably score fine under the new criteria anyway. But if it was originally programmed for 23 and now it's programmed for 27 because we've pushed out all these projects. Now we're saying, well, it's been 5 years, we're going to rescore you. And what is the potential outcome of that? Is the suggestion that we might remove projects because of this? Is a suggestion that we might take some action? And I think this sort of gets at my previous, last meeting, I spoke that where we are concerned about cost and scope, rightfully, it feels like we're treating the symptom and not the root of the problem, right? Like rescoring a project doesn't change why a project went up in cost or change the scope. We don't really fully understand some of those dynamics. And I know you're working hard to do that over time. But I feel like this isn't really, it's not providing a solution to the issue. It's sort of rejuggling the cards a little bit. So while I agree, if we haven't programmed a project and the project is sitting in the universe for a long time, needs to be rescored, absolutely. But where we take projects that are already programmed, that are moving along as best they can, and then sort of say to them, well, time for a rescore. We're not sure what that means. It could mean you're in, it could mean you're out. I'm not on board with that. Thank you.
Thank you, Jay. Lynn?
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chair. I pretty much agree with Jay. And I'm going to say things because I wasn't at the last Tipper meeting. And I also want to express appreciation to Ethan and Adriana for reaching out to me. And I feel that we should only mandate the rescoring. If we are pulling a project off the tip and putting it back into the universe, and at that point, it's competing with all other projects to get back onto the tip. And so this, I think, fits. I think we really need to work through our readiness policy improvement, to determine when we're going to take a project off the tip and put it back into the universe. And I'm all in favor of rescoring for intellectual purposes, to understand how a project meets the various metrics or criteria that are based on our values. But I have two questions. One is for the projects that are proposed by MassDOT as a fill-in basis. MassDOT does have a scoring process, right, for its projects, some way of evaluating, or ranking projects, or I'll just leave the question to that.
Yeah, so it's staff's understanding that MassDOT has a separate scoring process. It doesn't line up perfectly or necessarily closely with the MPO scoring process.
Yeah.
It's also only for the project review committee stage of projects, which can capture projects at a typically much less detailed state of project development. And also the objective of scoring projects, to my understanding, at the project review committee stage is just to determine eligibility for federal funding, not necessarily to make a determination as to if they should be funded within a program.
But there are some metrics, there's some criteria in there that even if it doesn't line up perfectly with ours, and I know perfectly is a straw man, but doesn't line up a lot with ours. There is enough information in there, I think, for us to evaluate them according to our metrics. And my other question is regarding to doing this for performance-based review. My recollection of the performance-based metrics is that they are a small subset of what we do. And so it seems to me that we can still do performance-based evaluation without doing the rescoring. Is that correct, Ethan?
Unfortunately, I can't say that's fully correct. So in order to meaningfully do the performance-based planning program work, which is a key part of the overall certification, certification document planning process, staff would actually need an understanding of exactly, for example, how many highway safety improvement program crash clusters projects are hitting, which we do not necessarily know without having more refined and updated project details. We also at times may not have a complete understanding of, for example, total lane miles of road being resurfaced, especially if lane geometry is being altered, like road diets, or total lanes of bike lanes being added to the network. So by having this rescoring, especially when scopes are changing, and especially with projects that have been on the tip for over 5 years that have very likely had scope changes, this is a way of making sure that the numbers that we are publishing are as accurate as possible. And those numbers help us to make sure that this is a cycle of evaluating our investments, which helps us to identify where the next investment should go.
Right. Well, so the last thing I'll say is that, okay, I mean, I think what's happening in my mind is that I'm kind of mixing up the notion of scoring with getting data about the project. For me, I feel that we should get all the data we can about a project, but that's different from scoring. But in my mind, but if getting data and scoring are the same thing, then I'm fine with that. But I think the implication of scoring is that we're now going to be comparing you to other projects in order to make some decision. And to get back to my agreement with Jay, it's like I would say we do the rescoring based on some criteria for why we are, based on some criteria that by which we have kicked the project off the tip and it's in the universe, and we're going to bring it back. Figuring out how and when to bring it back, out of the universe. So I could go on, but I'm going to stop now because other hands. Thank you.
Ethan, let me ask a question. Okay, so I took from your slide that the purpose of today is to give people a heads up. This is coming, and they need to get ready, right? Because here's my thing: we all know that costs increase on projects. We all know that money's tight. We all therefore assume that some projects are going to be either delayed or kicked off. This is an attempt to, in my view, to reset everybody's project to the same criteria so that when it comes time for us to make the decision of should we, delay or defer or kick off project X versus project Y, we have some independent scoring that says this is how it's scored based on our criteria, and that Ethan and his team and the proponents who we're going to talk about have enough time to actually get something scored fairly. Did I miss something, Ethan?
Yes, thank you. Frankly, you basically took the words out of my mouth on that as far as what I was going to say there. I want to make it clear that this request for funding, or this request for new information, does not automatically alter any project's funding status on the tip. It also is not meant to force the board to make a decision if a score changes. It's staff's understanding that these issues are going to persist in upcoming tip development. And it's more to make sure that when this board has to make a decision, which staff believe they may need to make a decision to remove a project, that decision can be made so fairly and with the best information that the board has available, which we do not currently have.
Brad Rawson.
Thank you, Chair. Well said. I really appreciate the thought partnership that multiple board members are bringing to the table here. However, I would respectfully recommend that the board do not limit the scope to some of the first part of our conversation here. I think the last part of the conversation, your points, Chair, and your points, Ethan, are actually getting us back to the objectives. The staff presentation described very clearly a problem statement that all of us lived through this past tip cycle and many tip cycles prior. We have, as a board, wrestled with the idea that we want to provide proponents with better customer service and clarity, that we want to provide the board and our agency partners with better information flow. And we took many important steps last tip cycle to improve that flow. I want to give a tip of the cap to the Mass DOT team like John and Derek and many others who educated us about risk and readiness and scoring. And yet our work is not done. And I believe that the staff presentation and recommendation here is consistent with our big picture efforts to improve transparency and predictability for all partners in this process. So again, fair play. This is a good discussion so far, but I would respectfully push back on some of the points made by my good friends and colleagues, Jay and Len. Thank you.
Other comments, discussion? Jay Monty.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. And thanks, Ethan and Brad. I appreciate the context there. And I think I didn't fully grasp that in the initial part of the presentation that this is. I think my concern was that we were doing this as a way to kind of evaluate commitments to projects that had a lot of, resources put at them, and I'm just nervous when we do that. So I can appreciate that this is a way to get a more clear-eyed look at what a project is and what it is, how it is advancing our goals. I still will say I think we are not treating the disease. I think we're treating the symptoms of this problem. And so I know we discussed last time that we need to dig deeper into why there are scope changes, why there are cost increases. I think that the insinuation that I feel sometimes when we have these discussions is that, well, the project proponent just isn't managing the project, or the project proponent just got greedy. Maybe that's not the intent, but that's sometimes what it feels like. When in fact, the reasons for these changes can be changes in design regulation, can be changes in material prices, can be changes in labor costs, and many, many things. And until we really have a discussion about that, when we change design regulations, which may all be for the better, there are cost implications. When we, hear from our partners of the state that the scope really does need to change because there's a structural issue with a bridge, or there is some other really critical issue, that's a legitimate reason, but it does impact cost. And so I think until we dig into those types of discussions, this is not solving our problem. It is giving us a better, look at comparing one another, but it's not solving the issue. So I can be supportive of this, but again, I don't think it's solving the disease. Thanks.
Yep. General.
Yeah, I just wanted to see if I think Len had his hand up first, and I'm kind of going to connect this to something else. So.
Okay, Lynn.
Okay, and I dropped my hand to let you go first, because I was interested in what you were going to say, but I understand, So look, I mean, I welcome the pushback from Brad or anyone else. I'm just not sure what Brad is pushing against me, but maybe you can explain. But what you said, Mr. Chair, I mean, clarifying what Ethan has said, and I also want to again express my appreciation for Ethan for making this point. A couple of days too. It does seem like we are doing this in preparation for determining, which projects to either push back any number of years, or off the tip and into the universe. So I think I appreciate that clarification, and to that extent, I am very supportive of doing the rescoring, because it is actual rescoring. Then it's not simply getting more details. Because we're going to use that information, to make a decision, which to be honest, is not going to be palatable, to some proponents, and I'm glad we're just being very clear-eyed about that. So yeah, I'm fine. Thank you.
Yeah, just and I'm sure that Ethan and staff will do this really well. But clearly when they go out and talk to these 13 communities, they will make it clear that rescoring is not a target on your back. It is not that you are one of the 13 projects that we're thinking might kick off a tip. It is not, right? Those 13 projects may all score really well and survive any culling that we have to do, if indeed we do, right? It's really important that it's presented that way, right? These projects aren't somehow in jeopardy, or we've identified them as, hey, we don't really think they're good. They just need to be caught up to the current scoring metric. It's really sort of just that, right? Jen?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And yeah, I agree with it. Very well stated. I just wanted to add one additional point. I appreciated Jay's comments about that this is certainly not treating the disease. This is more just like getting more information about what's before us, and which is very much the case. I will say that I just wanted to connect that comment to, I think, what the additional update that we're working on through Tipper and hope to bring to the board, which is a set of readiness guidelines, which themselves also don't necessarily like fix some of the root problems, but I think will provide even more clarity on what is going on and help alert us to, you know, what is happening earlier, like years before we get to this is the upcoming fiscal year and we need to talk about which projects have to get delayed. Like, I think these guidelines will help us identify some things amiss early in time for us to then do a better diagnosis and actually treat the patient, which I think is something we just haven't had the time to do because we've been recognizing the issues too late. So I just wanted to build that connection there.
Thank you, Jen. Other questions or comments? Any further discussion? Ethan, do you need us to say go forward, or this was just a heads up, we're going to do this and we want to let people know?
So this is mostly just a heads up, but
Okay.
staff will be coming back at a later MPO meeting about a full policy, such that this is something that can be done a little bit more predictably going forward.
But for these 13 communities, you and the rest of the supportive staff at the MPO are going to go off and start the process so people have 4 months to get this done.
Yes, staff notified the 13 communities starting last week. We will be sending them additional notices starting tomorrow, we believe.
Excellent. Thank you, Ethan. Next item on our agenda is, I
Chair.
believe, an update on
Mr. Chair.
yes?
Sorry, I think Brad has his hand up. If you don't,
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't see
in
Brad,
case
I'm
you didn't see
sorry.
it.
No,
Go ahead,
no,
Brad.
no worries, Chair. Weird backgrounds. Thank you very much. I just wanted, on that last question about notifying project proponents and staff's role reaching out, can you clarify, please, are all of the 13 projects municipal proponent projects, or are any of them Mass DOT proponent projects? I think we had some handoff and lack of clarity on the Hingham project in particular that we learned about this past tip cycle. Thank you.
Yes, very good question there. So staff have not only reached out to the proponents last week already, but also included each of the MassDOT project managers for all of the projects, and have notified and included in our initial outreach that there are shared responsibilities on some projects. That is something we intend to work out over these next few months as far as responsibility for submitting information.
Thank you, Brad.
So the answer is yes, there are some projects that have MassDOT proponent statuses.
Thank you, Ethan. Next item on the agenda is the Multi-Mobility Infrastructure Program Woburn Intersection Study. Kyle Casiglio.
Hi, good morning, everyone. My name is Kyle Casiglio, and I'm a senior active mobility planner here at the MPO. Today, I'm here to go through with an intersection study that we conducted at Commerce Way, Presidential Way, Atlantic Avenue, and the I-93 exit 30 ramps in Woburn, conducted under the Multimodal Mobility Infrastructure Program, or MMIP. Next slide, please. We'll talk briefly about the background behind the study and our community engagement efforts, followed by a dive into the existing conditions at the intersection, anticipated future conditions, our concerns there, and recommendations for interventions to address those concerns. I do also want to note up front, I will be moving through a lot of technical information in a relatively short block of time. The study is posted, and I'm happy to discuss the findings in more detail with anyone who is interested. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned, this study was conducted as part of the Multimodal Mobility Infrastructure Program. The MMIP aims to address gaps in both regional and community multimodal transportation needs and identify opportunities to advance towards a safe, integrated, sustainable, and accessible regional multimodal transportation system. This takes the form of site-specific studies where we look at a particular corridor or intersection, such as this one, as well as higher-level studies into issues that have region-wide impacts. To select locations for these site-specific studies, we use a scoring process that looks at factors such as safety, congestion, and regional significance. This particular intersection in Woburn scored highly because of safety concerns, growth pressure, and its regional significance as a multimodal transportation hub. It had been identified as a top 200 crash location in the state by Mass DOT and has a particularly high rate of injurious crashes, contributing to its inclusion in the high injury network from our recent Vision Zero action plan. It's also the gateway to the Anderson Regional Transportation Center, which has Amtrak, Regional Rail, and Logan Express service. North and south of the intersection are primarily offices and light industrial uses with some retail and restaurants as well. And finally, the area around the intersection is part of the city's MBTA Communities Act zoning district, and developments permitted or under construction alongside a new bridge over the railroad tracks stand to bring significant change to the area. Next slide, please. Here you can see the study intersection. On the northwest corner is a marijuana dispensary, and a relatively new multifamily development is on the southwest corner. Northeast and southeast corners are undeveloped wetlands that the Aberjona River runs through. The approaches to the intersection are all under local jurisdiction, with the exception of the highway ramps owned by Mass DOT. Next slide, please. With the assistance of Woburn's municipal staff, we put out a survey to the community in order to learn more about their experiences with the intersection. And we also put together a steering committee made up of residents, including one from the apartment complex at the intersection, as well as local, regional, and state partners. Next slide, please. While the intersection has high multimodal significance because of its proximity to a major transportation center, people primarily travel through the intersection in a private vehicle or in a shuttle such as Logan Express. Next slide. Why people travel through the intersection is a little bit more varied, with stores and restaurants receiving the most selections in our survey, followed by getting to work or accessing the Anderson RTC. People who selected other primarily listed access to I-93 and other regional destinations as their reason. Next slide. So looking at the existing conditions, with assistance from MassDOT, we collected traffic counts, turning movement data, speeds, and crash history. And then we also used those turning movement counts collected to do an analysis of the intersection's capacity. Next slide. As you can see here, this is a busy intersection with a high volume of traffic moving through the northbound, southbound, and westbound approaches. The eastbound approach, Atlantic Avenue, sees significantly less traffic. This is because of the lack of connectivity and destinations through Atlantic Avenue. Next slide, please. Turning movement counts allow us to get a sense of the flow of traffic. In this case, we can see a clear pattern of AM traffic, that's the first number in each series, coming off of the highway to destinations north and south, with PM traffic, that's the one in parentheses, in reverse. The weekend midday peak traffic is more directed to the shopping and restaurant opportunities south of the intersection, with noticeably less traffic going north of the intersection, which is primarily offices, or accessing the Anderson RTC, which people are taking to get to work downtown. Next slide. Speeds varied quite a bit between the different approaches, some of them being higher than ideal, particularly for traffic entering from the highway exits. We see a significantly higher speed than we do at the other approaches. Next slide, please. Looking at the crash data from the city and from MassDOT's impact portal, we also identified some specific patterns that we'll get into shortly. But as you can see here, there is a large number of crashes at the intersection. Those of which are circled are ones that resulted in an injury. And you can see a particularly high rate of injury crashes here as well. Next slide, please. Looking ahead into the future, we considered both background traffic growth and several key developments in the area, most notably the New Boston Street Bridge and projects along New Boston Street. Other projects like a potential transit-oriented development at the Anderson RTC factored into the decision to use a 1% background growth rate, which is consistent with the traffic impact analyses for the developments that are permitted or under construction currently. Together, these will significantly increase traffic demand in the corridor, which means the existing issues will become more pronounced if nothing changes. Next slide, please. So with that anticipated growth over the next 7 years, we utilized Synchro to assess the intersection's capacity and found that while we can expect some delay during the PM peak period, particularly on the southbound approach, the intersection should still be able to service the volume of vehicles moving through it in the future. Next slide. Now, based on our analysis of the existing and future conditions and informed by public comments and a field visit with municipal staff, we identified a few key concerns. A significant pattern of northbound and westbound angle collisions, a crash cluster just north of the intersection, side swipes on the northbound approach, and higher westbound speeds than we'd like to see. 2 of these, I'm very happy to share, were easily and quickly addressed. The crash cluster north of the intersection was primarily a result of people trying to turn left across Presidential Way and into the marijuana dispensary. The dispensary reconfigured their parking lot to make the Presidential Way entrance into an exit only. And since making that change 2 years ago, there have been 0 crashes at that cluster location. The largest issue is the consistent pattern of angle crashes between people traveling northbound through the intersection and those traveling westbound. These crashes have a high rate of injury and are the most common type of crash at the intersection, making up a little bit more than half of all the crashes observed between 2019 and 2024. During the field visit in October of last year, it was suggested that a change to the signal timing may address the issue, as the northbound approach had 2 green right turn arrows concurrent with the westbound green, leading some of those driving northbound and intending to proceed through the intersection to miss the fact that they actually have a red because they're looking at those green arrows. So the city implemented a new timing pattern as a pilot immediately after the field visit, and after seeing a dramatic reduction in crashes with minimal impact on congestion, made the new timing pattern permanent. In the 10 months since that new timing pattern was implemented, there's only been 1 angle crash at the intersection, which is down from a rate of 8 per year in the period that we observed from 2019 to 2024 under the old timing pattern. So this leaves us with 2 primary concerns, the northbound side swipes and the high westbound speeds, and our recommendations focus primarily on these issues. Next slide, please. In the short term, we recommend striping guiding lines for vehicles turning right onto the highway ramps from the 2 right turn only lanes in order to reduce ambiguity about where cars should be. Another source of side swipes stems from people attempting to proceed north from the left right turn only lane. We recommend replacing the broken right lane must turn right sign leading up to the intersection and using paint to extend the strip lane island north of the intersection, leaving only 1 lane to correspond to the 1 through lane at the northbound approach. High westbound speeds coming off of the highway are influenced by the long, straight, high visibility approach to the intersection as people are taking the exit. In the short term, we'd recommend implementing some calming measures such as transverse lane markings, advisory speed limit signage, and/or speed feedback signage. Unrelated to our 2 primary concerns, we'd also recommend repainting the crosswalk, which was considerably faded at the time of the field visit, and initiating the process to reduce the speed limit on Commerce Way to better match observed speeds and to align it with the speed limits on Presidential Way. Next slide, please. In the longer term, more permanent interventions may be advisable based on the performance of short-term improvements. This may include upgrading the slip lane extension from paint to concrete, installing a channel island to prevent through movements from the northbound right turn lane, and further addressing speeds on the westbound approach through the use of rumble strips and raising the median between the on and off ramps. Next slide. That concludes my overview of the study. The full study will be available on our website shortly, and I'm happy to discuss it in detail if anyone would like to reach out to me over email. I'll pause here and open it up for questions and discussions. Thank you.
Actually, I'm taking over the chair, so I have a question, but I'll hold mine for others. So David Mueller had to leave the meeting, so Eric Barassa, MAPC, I'm going to take over as chair, and I'll call on Len.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And great study, as usual. And I like the fact that there was some intervention done even before the study was completed. And I also like that you mentioned future uses and how this study didn't address the potential increases in pedestrians and cyclists. Looking at the developments in the areas, I guess I'm wondering to what extent cycling will become a thing. But as we all know, if we don't construct a place or a roadway, to be friendly towards cyclists, then they're not going to go there. So I'm wondering if in the developments, do you see any potential for significant increase in cyclists?
Yeah, thank you, Len. Great question. So we do address this in the memo, not
Yeah.
something we had time to include here in the presentation. At present, we do not see a significant presence of people biking through the intersection. I believe we counted an average of less than 5 a day. That being said, the new developments that are coming in are going to be primarily multifamily developments. There's intention there for these to be transit oriented. That's the point of, locating them proximate to the Anderson RTC. It is certainly possible, and I think even we would hope that there are going to be more people biking in the area. Right now, it is not a friendly environment for someone who wants to ride a bike through the intersection, and there are better approaches to the Anderson RTC from those developments than proceeding through this intersection in particular. I'm thinking of Congress Street, which is just north of this intersection.
Right.
That being said, we do not recommend including bicycle facilities as part of these short or long-term improvements here, given what we're seeing now and the potential alternative routes to access Anderson RTC.
Right. I get that, because looking at it, I'm kind of wondering how you could make it safe too, and so I think diverting, and making clear that alternative paths, an alternative is better. I did see one pedestrian strike there. Do you know any of the history behind that? Because once again, I'm not really seeing any. I can potentially see reasons for people wanting to cross that intersection, and regardless of how many may want to, we do want to make it safer if at all possible. So do you know what happened with that strike?
Yeah, so that pedestrian collision actually happened a little bit west of the intersection on Atlantic Avenue. Someone was crossing the street mid-block. I believe that was more of a one-off incident than kind of a systemic issue.
Yeah, gotcha. Okay, that's it. Thank you very much. Great study.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kyle. I had a similar question to Len, so thank you for answering that. Any other questions for Kyle? Okay, not seeing any. Thank you. Great presentation. Let's see, what is the next agenda item? I think it's Rebecca Morgan, the grant-funded project update.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning, everyone. I'm Rebecca Morgan, the Director of Projects and Partnerships at the Boston Region MPO. Before we dive into the updates on 2 of our grant-funded projects this morning, which include this agenda item and the next one, I'd like to set the stage for sharing some context on how these 2 projects connect with our broader grant regional strategy. Next slide, please. At our annual meeting in November, I outlined our strategy to leverage federal and state grant funding to accelerate progress toward our long-range transportation goals. As you'll hear in the more detailed presentations, these 2 projects are helping us make progress on pretty much all of these goals, with a particular focus on the 4 that I've highlighted here: equity, access and connectivity, mobility and reliability, and resiliency. Next slide, please. There are 4 main components of this regional strategy as shown here. The Vision Zero work, which we brought to this board in several updates over the past few months, has been a key project within this approach, with the focus really being on developing a regional strategy and an action plan. And the focus of that is advancing safety planning. Today, we'll be highlighting 2 other grant-funded projects that showcase additional components of this strategy. So the building tools, data, resources, and pilots that provide municipalities stronger support and turning our shared goals into real on-the-ground solutions. Next slide, please. Firstly, Mobility, Access, Transportation, and Insecurity grant program, also known as MADI, is a pilot design project developed in partnership with MEPC, municipalities, the neighborhood developers, Union Capital, and former staff of the car sharing company Good to Go. The pilot design combines transit subsidies with electric car sharing at affordable housing. This pilot will allow us to test innovative ways to improve transportation access and affordability, with really transit as the backbone. So although this project is focused in a couple of municipalities, this pilot model could be scaled to benefit additional communities across the region. Next slide, please. Secondly, our No Heat project focuses on heat resilience and active transportation. As we're all aware, extreme heat is becoming more and more of a problem, particularly for those who have the highest heat exposure. In partnership with Georgia Tech, Walk Mass, Mass Bike, Bike to the Sea, Mystic River Watershed Association, and municipal leaders, we've produced fine-grained data sets to identify heat risk for people walking and biking. Using these data that tells us where people are at highest risk, we'll be piloting cooling strategies to make walking and biking safer, more comfortable, and more accessible, even on the hottest days. Next slide, please. What ties these projects together is partnerships. These successes have really only been possible because of the strong collaboration between municipalities, community organizations, advocates, researchers, and the MPO. Together, these efforts, along with Vision Zero, demonstrate that our regional grant strategy is working. These are not isolated projects. They're proof points of a deliberate approach where we're securing funding, building strong partnerships, producing actionable data and resources for technical assistance, and piloting solutions that can be scaled regionally and ultimately lead to capital projects. With that context, I'll hand it over to Joe DeLordo to share more on the MADI project, and his presentation will be followed by an update from Jen Amico Kaplan and Seth Stromwisser on the No Heat project, which is the next agenda item. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Rebecca. Joe.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Rebecca. Thank you, Mr. Chair. And good morning, everybody. My name is Joe DeLordo. I'm a data analyst on the MPO's Project Analysis and Applications team. And as Rebecca mentioned, I'll be speaking to you about the work that we've completed as part of Phase 1 of the Mobility, Access, and Transportation Insecurity Grant Program, also known as MADI. Next slide, please. So MADI is an FTA-funded grant program that's being administered by the University of Minnesota's Center for Transportation Studies. And the Center for Transportation Studies is building up a body of research around transportation insecurity, which is similar to concepts that folks may be more familiar with, like food insecurity or housing insecurity, that they define as being regularly unable to get from place to place in a safe or timely manner because of a lack of resources. So as part of Phase 1 of the MADI program, 8 local groups, including the Boston Region MPO, received a $150,000 grant to design a pilot program to help address transportation insecurity in their local communities. These pilot programs are intended to be participatory demonstrations that rely primarily on public transportation. And of these 8 local groups that are designing pilots in Phase 1, 4 of them will go on to receive implementation funding through the future Phase 2 of the MADI program. Next slide, please. So here is an illustration of where in the country each of the 8 local teams are based. It's a very geographically diverse group, and there's also many different kinds of organizations, including nonprofits, higher education, transit authorities, and public health boards, to name a few. So it's a very interesting group and very interesting cohort of local teams that have been selected. Next slide, please. So our project is specifically focused on advancing universal basic mobility in affordable housing communities in Chelsea, Everett, and Revere. And we're intending to do this through 2 interventions, one of which is a reduced transit fare, as well as income-tiered car sharing. Next slide, please. So as far as providing access to a reduced transit fare, we're planning to provide residents with assistance in signing up for the MBTA's income-eligible reduced fare program. Recent data from the MBTA shows that there were fewer than 1,000 approved applicants each in Chelsea and Revere, so there is a real opportunity for us to help people enroll in the communities where folks could benefit the most from access to a reduced transit fare. We're also planning to provide an affordable community car sharing system in these communities. Shared vehicles will be located directly at affordable housing sites to help eliminate the first and last mile problem. We will have income tiered pricing to ensure that all residents are able to benefit from this program. And we also plan to include an ambassador program whereby folks can provide rides for others to things like medical appointments, or if folks are just simply not able to drive themselves, to help provide rides for others in their community in exchange for credits that they can then use for their own purposes. Next slide, please. And so as Rebecca mentioned, this work touches on a lot of the Destination 2050 goal areas that this board really wanted to emphasize in our LRTP: access and connectivity, equity, mobility and reliability, as well as resiliency. Next slide, please. So as part of this work, we've partnered with our colleagues at MAPC, as well as researchers at Georgia Tech, to help lead the design of the pilot program. We also partnered with staff from Good to Go, which was an affordable electric car sharing service in Boston that unfortunately shut down at the end of last year. And so while we did intend for them originally to operate the car sharing service for us, we were able to partner with former staffers who provided us with a lot of great subject matter expertise, as well as connecting us with former users of the service to understand their experiences since the service shut down. We worked very closely with the neighborhood developers, who are a nonprofit community development organization in Chelsea, Everett, and Revere, who connected us with residents and will host the car sharing service at their residences if we get implementation funding through phase 2. And finally, we also worked with Union Capital to conduct some community engagement with residents of the larger Boston region to help understand their experiences with transportation and security. Next slide, please. And so talking of community engagement, one of the great aspects of the MATI program is the emphasis that was placed on community engagement. The program administrators really emphasized the importance of community engagement to creating a strong proposal that truly meets the needs of communities that we're aiming to serve. To that end, we conducted in-person and online focus groups, surveys, and interviews with residents of the neighborhood developers' properties, Union Capital members, and former Good to Go users. These focused on people's experiences with transit affordability, access, and reliability, and as well as any experiences that they may have had with car sharing as well. Next slide, please. So just to highlight some key findings and takeaways of that community engagement process, as far as public transit, we found that many of the people we talked to use transit regularly, but overall have a low confidence in transit when it comes to particularly time-sensitive appointments. We spoke to a lot of people who had to reschedule or skip medical appointments because of difficulties with transportation, which was a bit of a recurring theme. And critically for the design of our phase 2 implementation work, there was a lack of awareness of the MBTA's income-eligible reduced fare program among folks that we spoke to. So this is really a key focus area of our application for phase 2 funds and our plans for our pilot program. On the car sharing front, we did speak to former Good to Go members about their experiences since Good to Go shut down. And across the board, users reported higher expenses and reduced mobility since the program shut down. And this manifested in a few ways. For one thing, folks just spoke about taking fewer social and recreational trips, or feeling like they had fewer options for destinations for those kinds of trips. But several folks also spoke about sacrificing artistic pursuits or careers because it can be difficult to haul art supplies or access musical performance opportunities on transit. And finally, most TND residents, the neighborhood developers residents that we spoke to, had not used car sharing previously, but they did say that it could be useful and could envision it playing a role in their lives, and they had a positive response to our project concept as well. Next slide, please. So also to speak about some key challenges and opportunities that emerged through this work. As I mentioned, unfortunately, Good to Go did cease operations last year, and we had planned for them to operate the car sharing service. So we will need to identify a new operator as part of phase 2 or the implementation of this work. However, this did provide an opportunity for additional outreach among former members to more fully understand the impacts of car sharing and what happens when that option is taken away. We also had some struggles with engagement turnout at the housing communities, which we believe is largely due to factors beyond our control. We did improve our response rate significantly in later rounds of engagement by providing incentives for surveys and emphasizing anonymous surveys as well in those later rounds of engagement. Finally, the MBTA's income eligible reduced fare program is a great opportunity as far as this work is concerned. The initial sort of concept for this demonstration was developed before the income eligible fare program was fully developed and approved. So rather than using grant funds to directly subsidize transit fares for people, we're primarily aiming to help them sign up for IERF benefits. And that's a lot more efficient from the grantee's perspective, from a resources perspective, but then also for the participants, these benefits will last well beyond the lifetime of the grant. So that's a great persistent benefit that we can, leverage this opportunity to provide to people. And next slide, please. And finally, just some next steps. We are still awaiting word on whether we've been selected for the Phase 2 implementation grant. And if we are selected, we will be shortly moving forward with the pilot program in these communities. And regardless of the outcome of the grant application, as Rebecca mentioned, we feel that we have a very strong pilot design and that this can be a proving ground for advancing affordable community car sharing as part of a more sustainable, equitable transportation system across the entire region. And this is something that we can hopefully scale up in the future. So that concludes my presentation. I'm happy to take any questions now.
Thanks, Joe. Any questions? Brad Rawson.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, staff. Sounds like a terrific effort. I definitely got a question, but first I just want to acknowledge that I'm really excited about this work. Around the country, universal basic mobility programs in places like Pittsburgh and Los Angeles have been gaining a lot of traction, have been evaluated rigorously, and have been associated with really positive outcomes for participants. And we've been trying to learn from them in Somerville with some local projects, including a local project that MAPC supported us on, with actually working with one of our local nonprofits, distributing free transit passes, conducting focus groups to understand mobility pattern changes, customer satisfaction, et cetera. So Joe, I would definitely recommend, if you haven't done so with Eric and the team, please do connect with them to see if there are any transferable lessons learned from our work on program evaluation. I'm excited to hear that we've submitted an implementation grant request, but one question I have that I don't think you answered in your presentation: will the implementation grant actually fund income eligible transit passes, or is the scope simply to assist participants with signups? There's a huge difference in the efficacy in my mind between those two options. Thank you.
Yes, so our primary, as far as the reduced transit fares, our primary aim is to use the funds to fund staff time to help people sign up so that they would get their reduced transit fares benefits directly through the MBTA, rather than using grant funds to subsidize those, to subsidize directly the transit fares. And also on the point of the pilot program that you mentioned, we did actually have a chance to look at some of the survey response data and the lessons learned from that as well. And that was really helpful and actually provided some great background and context for our Phase 2 application. So thanks to the City of Somerville and MAPC for that.
And Brad, we did an extensive literature review on all the programs across the country. We have that if any municipalities are interested. It's not like a formal report, but we have all the background. And I would say one of the key findings was that in all of these programs, you can offer a benefit program to low-income people. Many of them don't sign up. They're not aware of it. You actually need to go to them and hold their hand and get them to do it. The most effective programs are ones where the sign up process was literally in the affordable housing site where people lived, or it was you actually brought it to them. And I think that's some of the findings that we found from our work in Somerville too, was that it was effective in the schools where the ambassadors went and signed people up. So I think that is a thing we need to think about. And as we study the MBTA's program too, what's being done to really facilitate that outreach. But these are all great questions, and I really appreciate it. Len Diggins.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, along those lines, what I also suggest, because reaching, doing the outreach into the housing communities is extremely hard, and it helps to get someone from inside the community, to be your ambassador. Because if you're not from inside the community, you are viewed as an outsider. And people are just wary of outsiders. I think we all are, and so people just there are any number of things they can do other than interact with you, and that's what they do. But I am very excited about this, and I'm very happy to be in complete harmony with Brad on this. I am interested in knowing a little bit more about how you're going to do the car sharing now that Good to Go is gone. Any thoughts about that?
Yeah,
I thought I heard a little hint of what you were thinking about doing, and so I just want to kind of flesh that out a little bit.
Yeah, so if we were to be awarded specifically the phase 2 implementation funding through Maddie, if we are awarded those funds, sort of the first step in the implementation process for us would be identifying an operator through an RFP process. So as part of our work, putting together our application for phase 2, we did speak to, and previously we spoke to, car sharing operators from across the country and, saw what the interest might be in that kind of thing. So we've baked that into the plan for our implementation in phase 2.
I got you. Well, electric is good. But if electric isn't an option, let me back up a little bit. You might want to explore peer-to-peer. In which case, you might not necessarily be doing electric because people may not have electric vehicles that they want to share with other people. And I'm also kind of curious as to how one handles the other end of the car sharing program, because you can locate the vehicles in a place, like let's say in a housing community, but then if they drive to a destination, what happens at that other end? Is there car sharing, incentivized at that other end so that the car isn't just sitting there not being used on the other end? So I'm just curious about that, or just suggest that we think about how we handle the other end. And also with respect to time sensitivity, and people being insecure, or not feeling that, it's not reliable. People say that about transit. It's the case about every mode. I think regardless of how I'm going from point A to point B, unless I'm walking, I'm not sure how long it's going to take me to get there. So that's just a network issue that we just have to work on solving, on a network level instead of just a transit level, because as we all know too, transit, especially anything on the roadways, can be affected by other things that happen on the network. That's it. But thank you. Great work, and I look forward to hearing more about it and helping out however I can.
Thank you, Len.
Thanks, Len. Brad, you have another question? Yeah.
Thanks, Chair. Just one last commercial, because I hope that others are as inspired by this discussion as we are. And to build on Len's point, another best practice that has emerged around the country and that Somerville has tried to honor with some of our programs is that when we partner with community-based organizations who have relationships and accountability and authenticity that perhaps the public sector partners don't always have, it is really critically important that we pay them for their time. So I just want to make sure that as we think about implementation grants, that we're building budgets along those lines. And then anybody who's kind of really kind of stewing on this and inspired by this going forward, don't take those things for granted. It's not appropriate for us to ask our nonprofit partners to do the work and not pay them for their time.
100%.
Yeah, Joe, do you want to speak to that too? I think we budgeted funding for that in this.
We did. There's both in phase 1 that was completed and in our proposed budget for phase 2, we did, cover the staff time for our nonprofit partners. So they are fairly remunerated for their work for us, which was very important.
Yeah, totally agree. Thanks, Brad. Tegan.
I'll just add that the MPO is now following that practice, that best practice across all the work that we are doing. So we are working to ensure that we are compensating community-based organizations, whether they be on a working group or involved in a study like this. And so, Brad, we're rolling out that best practice to the greatest extent that we can, because we do completely agree. So I just wanted to, beyond this, we are also doing that as well.
Thank you, Tegan. Any other questions about the Maddie grant? Okay, seeing none, then we will move to the no heat grant. And Jen.
That was a bit misleading. I'm actually starting the presentation.
Okay, Seth.
My name is Seth Stromwasser. I'm a data analyst at the MPO, and I'm here today with my colleague Jenny Miko Kaplan to talk about a grant-funded project we've been working on called No Heat, neutralizing onerous heat effects on active transportation. Next slide, please. So here's a quick overview of the presentation. I'll give a quick introduction to the project, talk about the critical need that we're addressing, the data sets that we've been creating, and then I will hand it off to Jen to talk about our engagement work and the next steps for the project. Next slide. So like I said, this project is called Neutralizing Onerous Heat Effects on Active Transportation, otherwise known as No Heat. The project is funded through a $1 million grant from the Municipal Vulnerability Preparedness Program, which comes from the Massachusetts Executive Office of Energy and Environmental Affairs. In this project, we have been generating data sets that help us identify locations with the highest heat risk for people walking and biking. And at these locations, we will be working with municipalities and community-based organizations to develop heat mitigation pilots. This work is a collaboration between the MPO, researchers at Georgia Tech, our partnering municipalities, which are Chelsea, Everett, Revere, and Framingham, and community-based organizations, which include Walk Massachusetts, Mass Bike, Bike to the Sea, and the Mystic River Watershed Association. And again, this project is funded by the Municipal Vulnerability Preparedness Program. Next slide, please. And just to connect with what Rebecca said earlier, again, these are the Destination 2050 LRTP goals, goal areas that this project touches on, and these include access and connectivity, equity, and resiliency. Next slide. So to set the stage here, we all know what it's like to walk down the sidewalk on a hot day. Some of you might have experienced that this morning on your way to work, although it's a pretty lovely day today. This is St. Mary's Street near Boston University. It's very exposed to the sun. The sidewalks are narrow. You're walking over the pike, so it's very loud. I think we can all agree that this looks like an unpleasant place to walk. Next slide, please. But right around the corner, we have this street, Carlton Street. It looks nice and cool. The sidewalk is separated from the street. There's only one lane of traffic. I, for one, would love to go for a walk here. So hopefully this gets us in the mindset to talk about the issues that we're addressing with this study. Next slide, please. So this project builds off of research that demonstrates a concept called perceived distance. This is where two trips of the same length can feel like they are longer or shorter than they actually are. You can see in this graphic that these sidewalks are the same length, but the one on the top is nice and wide. It's got benches to rest on, trees for shade, stores that you can stop in. The one on the bottom, on the other hand, is in bad shape. It's all cracked up. It's got lots of cars going by. It's very narrow. So this distance might feel longer to somebody who's walking. Next slide, please. One factor that has a significant effect on perceived distance of a trip is heat. This map is showing walk sheds around commuter rail stations in Boston with and without heat stress and on typical and extremely hot days. So these are the places that you can reach from the station with a half-mile walk. You can see that the hottest days lead to the longest perceived distances and thus the smallest walk sheds in orange. And this means that people's access to important destinations like transit stations are limited. If a half-mile walk feels more like 2 miles, you're less likely to make that trip. Next slide. Another aspect of this issue is that there are known disparities in heat exposure for lower income neighborhoods compared to higher income ones. Things like heat mitigating infrastructure, access to vehicles, air conditioning, other amenities are less common in lower income communities. And this means that people are more vulnerable to heat, and therefore, like we saw in the last slide, they're more likely to have their access to important destinations limited on hot days. Next slide. So obviously, this is an important issue for us to study, and that requires high quality data. A common data source for heat stress is land surface temperature, which is shown on the top two maps. This covers the entire region, and it provides insights about disparities in heat exposure between neighborhoods, but it's at a 30-meter resolution, and it has a temporal resolution of more than 2 weeks. So this means that there's only one value for every 30 by 30 meter area, and we only get new data once in a 2-week period. On the bottom, you can see an example of the data that we're producing in No Heat. This is 1 meter resolution, which means we can compare at a very fine scale, even two sides of the same street. If you remember those first two images I showed with 30-meter resolution data, those two streets would read as the same temperature, which we obviously know is not the case. And you can see here where I've highlighted Commonwealth Avenue, there's far more detail available on the 1 meter resolution data. Our data can also be produced on an hourly basis, so we can focus on the hottest parts of the day. Additionally, not only are these data higher resolution, but the metric that we're calculating, the Universal Thermal Climate Index, is a new and different way to measure how people experience heat. Land surface temperature comes from satellites, which have a top-down view of the landscape. These measurements include things like rooftops and highways, which are places where people don't normally travel. Next slide, please. The Universal Thermal Climate Index, or UTCI, is a model that takes into account the way that the human body experiences heat. It uses factors like the sun angle, shadows from buildings and trees, wind speed, of course, temperature and humidity. There's also a physiological and clothing model component, which take into account the effect of clothing, sweating, shivering, things that affect how a human body experiences the temperature. And so this is a much better indicator of heat stress in humans. For example, we all know that 90 degrees in the shade on a breezy day feels very different from 90 degrees in the sun with no breeze. Next slide, please. And so here's a quick example of what this finer grain comparison could look like. These are 3 streets in Back Bay that are very close together: Marlborough Street, Commonwealth Avenue, and Boylston Street. With the high resolution UTCI data, we can see that Commonwealth Avenue feels much more comfortable than the other two. And Marlborough Street is still better than Boylston, which has very few trees. Next slide. And so the data sets that we have produced in this project include the UTCI, which I discussed, and model-generated walking and biking volumes. And so we combined these data sets to get the heat risk for each segment in the network. We repeated this process for a typical summer day and the hottest day in 2023. And for 3 different times during the day: 9 a.m. the morning peak, 1 p.m. at midday, and 5 p.m. for the evening peak. Next slide, please. And so here's what the UTCI data looks like. It is produced as a raster data set, which is a grid that has a value in degrees Celsius for every 1 square meter cell. We overlaid this data with the road network and calculated the mean UTCI along each road segment. And just to give an idea of the scale we're looking at, this is showing the hottest day in 2023, which was July 27th. And the hottest areas feel like 45 degrees Celsius, which is more than 110 degrees Fahrenheit. And the coolest areas in yellow-green are in the low 30s Celsius or 80s Fahrenheit. Next slide. And so here's a visualization of the data and how we arrived at the priority corridors that we're going to be using to select locations for mitigation pilots. The map on the left has the UTCI assigned to the road network, like I mentioned, and the darker red areas have higher UTCI values. These middle 2 maps show walking and biking volumes in Framingham, and the rightmost maps show the corridors that we called out based on the risk data. I didn't actually show the risk data here because it's a little bit messy, but we chose these priority corridors based on where the highest risk segments were and also what we felt made most sense from a planning perspective. And just to reiterate, we produced this data for the whole region, but we focused on identifying priority locations in our 4 partner municipalities, which again are Chelsea, Everett, Revere, and Framingham. And we used the data to identify 20 priority corridors, 10 for walking and 10 for biking. So now I'm going to hand it off to Jen to talk about phase 2 of the project and our ongoing engagement efforts.
Thank you, Seth. Next slide, please. Great. So we are now in phase 2 of the work, which focuses on ground truthing the data from phase 1 through engagement. This diagram shows our work scope in phase 2, which will run through the end of June 2026, which is the state fiscal year. So we started with the 20 corridors that were identified as part of phase 1, and we have now narrowed down that list to 6 walk corridors and 6 bike corridors, where we are conducting bike audits in Revere, Chelsea, Everett, and Framingham. These are conducted in partnership with our engagement partners on this effort, and I'll be discussing those a little bit more in our following slides. The corridors and the data that went into selecting them were also validated by our municipal partners on this effort, who agreed that these were high-risk locations that they wanted to conduct these audits at. The audits are being conducted through September, and then that will be leading to the selection of 3 pilot site locations where we'll build heat mitigating quick build projects. And that will be subsequently be installed in partnership with our municipalities and evaluated by our team over the course of a year. Can we please move over one slide? Great. So just quickly, I do want to share the location of our walk audits and bike audits. So these are the final sites that were selected as part of our walk audits that are being conducted in partnership with Walk Mass. So as you can see, we have finished 4 of these walk audits. We do have 2 left if anybody's interested in joining us, one in Revere and then one in Everett. I'm happy to share the RSVP information forms that Walk Mass has developed with this group afterwards if you're interested in joining. They're usually about a mile in length. And then if we can go over to the next slide. Next slide, please. Thank you. And then these are the final sites for our bike audit locations where we have finished 5 of these already. So we have been working with Mass Bike on the locations in Revere, Framingham, Chelsea, and Everett, and then specifically Bike to the Sea for the location within the Northern Strand Community Trail. Again, happy to share the RSVP information if anybody would like to join us for our last bike audit in Chelsea, which will be next week. Next slide, please. So conducting walk and bike audits was an important step for us to take within our scope as it helps us ground truth the data that we have developed. For those who are not familiar with a walk or bike audit, it's a process in which a person or group walks and bikes through a designated route to assess pedestrian bike accessibility and safety. In this case of these audits that we've done for no heat, we have added an element where we can improve comfort from extreme heat, identifying areas where there's an opportunity for shade or other infrastructure that would offer respite from the hot weather within this trip. In the 9 audits that we have conducted so far, they've proven to be an invaluable opportunity to work closely with our trusted partners within the active transportation space. These audits have been a chance for us to speak with members of the public and in some cases confirm and further identify challenges that our communities face to becoming safe and comfortable spaces for people to walk, bike, and roll. Furthermore, this qualitative data is being used to actually inform the selection and design of these pilots. I also wanted to mention that we're working closely with Mystic River Watershed Association, an environmental advocacy group, to conduct engagement alongside these audits on interventions where we ask members of the public who stop at our table about short and long-term interventions they may be interested in seeing on these corridors. And I'm also happy to say, just what Tegan mentioned before, we are practicing best practices for this engagement in partnership with our orgs and have formally contracted and working with them to compensate their staff time. And we're also compensating any members of the public who participate in these audits with gift cards to local businesses. And just a preview of what we've heard so far, we have heard that there is a lack of critical bike infrastructure in a few of these locations, and also that they prohibit use of access to critical destinations along the site, for instance, schools that have been on a few of the corridors that we've looked at. And that, of course, space for shade is also really hard to find on some of these corridors. So we're looking forward to the challenge of figuring out where these final 3 pilot locations will be and what they will look like. Next slide, please. I'd also like to discuss briefly what kind of pilot interventions we are talking about when we talk about quick build pilot interventions for heat mitigation. When we initially applied for this grant, we imagined a pretty broad list of what these interventions could look like. But our goal was always that these interventions should mitigate heat and be for the benefit of the people who are walking and biking. So we've included a few options here to give you a sense of what we've been looking at. They range from everything from shade sails to bus shelters. You'll see that some of these are more temporary or short-term, while some of them feel much more long-term and permanent. And that's because we do see this as an opportunity for quick build structures to be the testing grounds for long-term solutions. While we might not be able to plant a canopy of trees in the next few months with this project, our hope is that by people experiencing the changes that we implement with these pilots and that shade and comfort that they might feel through a shade sale, that would inform and encourage the data that the city would need to inform long-term planning efforts to actually plant that canopy of trees in the long term. Next slide, please. So this is our schedule for the next 10 months. We're currently in the middle of conducting these audits, as you saw on our earlier slides. The pilot design process will start as soon as these audits are completed at the end of September. And then we will be spending hopefully November through May evaluating these pilots themselves. I also want to mention towards the end of our phase 2, we're actively working on developing a prototype of an app called Cool Routing app, which will be a tool for us to share both extreme heat and safety data with the public. The way that we currently think about travel-based apps is by how fast can you get somewhere? But our hope is that within this app, we are thinking about adding the element of how much can we address, how can it be the coolest and safest way for someone to get to a location? So we're looking forward to sharing that. And again, that will be more of a prototype, nothing that will be formal yet. We go to the next slide, please. Great, so I'll end here by just sharing a complete list of deliverables from phase 1, the Seth shared, and then phase 2. So within phase 1, we have delivered a state-of-the-art data set that integrates urban microclimate and mobility data across the region. In phase 2, we are delivering these 6 walk audits and 6 bike audits, along with the 3 pilots that evaluate the impact of quick build infrastructure on heat mitigation, as well as this Cool Routing app prototype. I will also just mention that while we are working with these 4 municipalities who have been amazing partners in this effort, we are looking forward to using this data to provide engagement and technical assistance to additional communities within our region who are thinking about heat mitigation for their high bike corridors. So that's about it from me. Thank you for your time today, and both Seth and I are happy to answer any questions.
Thanks, Jen. Seth, any questions for them? Jen Rowe.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Really exciting work, and so neat getting to hear about it. I remember a little bit of the preview from the annual meeting, and so yeah, thank you for sharing. I 2 questions. One, I know my colleague Nayeli, who's still out on maternity leave, was particularly interested in this body of work, and I was curious. I've been taking some screenshots, but if there's plans for like a report or something like that at the end. And then the second is this data set would be really fascinating to look at. Is that something that'll be available for folks to publicly or for like members or municipalities? And then actually maybe a third quick question there is it sounds like this information was captured once. Is there any plan for kind of continued work? I know, for example, we've been reconstructing Cummings Highway, and it would be fascinating to see what the difference is before and after, building a complete street with a lot of much more urban canopy, for example.
Yeah, I think I can answer most of those. I might have to ask Jen about another one, but so yes, the intention is to release this data so people can take a look at it and use it. We're still working on what's the best way to do that. We're hoping to get that done sometime this fall. I don't think that there's any plan to produce a report about this study. Jen, correct me if I'm wrong. And now I'm forgetting the third question.
Oh, like any plan for looking at additional time periods?
Right. Yeah, we currently don't have any plans to sort of rerun the analysis, but the way that we conducted the project was with an eye to being able to do that. So we have very rigorously coded workflows. That is also material that we're hoping to make public as sort of the code that we used and the tools. It's all open source, free and open source, which is great. And I think there's certainly, producing this data for, two dates on either side of a project being completed would be, a relatively easy task. So we're hoping that we can use it for that purpose.
That's awesome. Thank you.
And I'll just follow up on what Seth said, is that we currently do not have plans to release a report. We are delivering memos to the MVP program per our scope of work, but we are exploring what would be the most public accessible and exciting way to share this information. One idea that's been thrown out is a story map that actually takes some of the spatial data that we've been gathering within these audits. So more to come on that.
Great, thank you all. So not seeing any other questions, I think we can move on to the final agenda item, which is members' items. Are there any members' items? Not seeing any. I just want to take this opportunity to remind folks about the Boston MPO election process, which we have 4 open seats. They're all sub-regional seats: the Magic seat, the Metro West seat, the Inner Core seat, and the South Shore Coalition seat. And so the nomination process, all of that information is on the website. Feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions. And nominations are due October 6th. And we're going to be coming to some of the subregions we already have to discuss this. And once again, reach out to me or folks at the MBTA Advisory Board if you have any questions, and happy to talk. Brad Rawson.
Thank you, Chair. You definitely teed it up, and I know that my colleague Tom Bench mentioned this specifically last meeting, but it's probably worth reiterating that the City of Somerville is intending to seek nomination and to continue serving as Inner Core representative. Thank you to our neighbors and other board members who have already replied and responded that their municipal CEOs would be happy to sponsor nomination and be supportive. As you all know, we're very committed to this work, to regionalism and to building bridges between subregions, not just focusing on the Inner Core. We're really proud of our work and look forward to trying to continue to do that work in the future. So thanks MAPC for all the technical assistance. If anybody has questions or concerns, or honestly wants to run against us, we're about results, and we will extend the hand and share our lessons learned, but we think that we're well positioned to serve again. So thanks so much.
Awesome. Thank you, Brad. So not seeing any, Jen, do you wanna?
Just a invitation that we have another Open Streets coming up at Ave. So we'd love to see you out there.
Frank, did you want to say anything? You're just muted. Maybe someone can ask.
I was going to move to adjourn.
That's great. Can I have a second?
Leonard seconds.
Okay, then without objection, we are adjourned. Thank you everyone for a great meeting, and we'll see you later this month. Take care.